I'm Michael Soper from the Commission, and I'm in the Asset Management and Compliance Division, and we are ready to start our session. And I'm delighted to introduce Richelle Perez from the Department of Ecology, and Bob Warren, who's also from the Department of Ecology. And they're going to talk about affordable housing cleanup grant programs, or one that they're going to supercharge. And grant programs are a great way. This type of grant would be a great way to help you find and use that land that you couldn't otherwise use. So it's really important, and you know how difficult it is to get land for projects and properties. So that so we'll be taking questions after the presentation from Richelle. So please be sure to put that into the chat. Please do that when you can. Thanks. So Richelle, take it away.
Good morning and welcome to this session on Ecology's Affordable Housing Cleanup Grant Program. Thank you for joining us so early. You might still be enjoying your first cup of coffee, or maybe your house is like mine and your family's still making their way out the door to school or wherever their day will take them. I really appreciate that you've joined me this morning for this discussion. Contaminated properties, due to their urban locations, sometimes have great potential for redevelopment as affordable housing. We're helping lessen the financial burden to clean up these contaminated sites by providing planning and cleanup grants for redevelopment projects committed to affordable housing. I'll highlight several pilot projects that saw success and talk about our current process to develop a competitive grant program. My name is Richelle Perez. I'm the Policy and Technical Support Unit Supervisor for the Toxics Cleanup Program at the Washington State Department of Ecology. I'm newer to the world of affordable housing. My introduction to this work evolved from a desire to integrate environmental justice into the daily aspects of my work. My background is in environmental policy, and I first engaged with affordable housing about 2017. That's when our program started talking about how to build on the success of a few initial projects in our Northwest Regional Office and design programmatic efforts to align the cleanup of contaminated sites with the support for the development of affordable housing. I also have Bob Warren here with me today to help answer questions during the discussion at the end of the session. Bob manages the Northwest Regional Office, which covers the Seattle area and King County all the way up to the Canadian border. He and his team have been integral to both the genesis of this work for organization and critical to the on-the-ground implementation of specific projects in their geographic responsibility. The general outline of the topics I'm going to cover today starts with the vision, program history, and overview of the program, and then we'll talk through some of the early accomplishments. The Toxics Cleanup Program focuses on overseeing the cleanup of spills that have contaminated land and water throughout Washington. We have seen that development is the primary driver of most of the recent cleanup work, particularly in the Northwest region, where dense and growing populations and limited room to expand are fueling rapid redevelopment. Gentrification and displacement tends to follow many cleanup projects as developers are faced with the cleanup to recover the costs as developers are faced with the need to recover the costs of cleanup. Through this program, our vision is to facilitate affordable housing through environmental cleanup. The Affordable Housing Cleanup Grant Program is one of the ways that Ecology is working to alleviate the effects of this trend and integrate environmental justice into our work. These grants help cover the costs of redeveloping contaminated properties while also ensuring that the properties are safe for residential use after cleanup. Highly populated areas have a higher concentration of contaminated sites. As you can see on this map, each dot here represents a site in various stages of cleanup. In a typical situation, the cost of cleanup would be passed from the developer to tenants and and home buyers, fueling a trend towards gentrification and displacement of less economically advantaged populations. By providing funding for cleanup work that supports affordable housing, Ecology can help reduce the uncertainty and risk of cleaning up contaminated sites while offsetting the costs. In this way, Ecology helps reduce the economic impact of cleanup and incentivizes the development of affordable housing. So there are multiple factors that drive the need for this program. First of all, the need for affordable housing in our state. And it often overlaps with a great need for environmental cleanup. And then our own desire to integrate environmental justice and social equity into our work. Many of you in the audience have more experience doing this important affordable housing work than me, so I anticipate that you're more familiar with the articles about the need, the crisis even, for affordable housing. We can look to the data and available tools to understand the needs of various communities. The Affordable Housing Cleanup Grant Program combines the need for affordable housing with the need for environmental cleanup. So we try to combine those two benefits in geographic areas where we can have a positive impact on the community. This means assisting communities that are at higher risk of displacement, that have a greater environmental health disparities, and have higher levels of unaffordable housing. I'm going to dig into a little bit more detail on each of those aspects. First of all, less economically advantaged communities tend to be at a higher risk of displacement. So we use some of the publicly available tools like the displacement risk map shown here to help us gain a greater picture of potential gentrification in the Puget Sound area. The displacement risk map is used to identify which neighborhoods in the region are at higher risk of displacement. This map shows the Mount Baker Maddox project, which we funded through our pilot program. In this case, the affordable housing project is located in an area with moderate displacement risk. I'll share a little bit more about this project later in the presentation and be using it as an example throughout. Secondly, less economically advantaged communities tend to be concentrated in areas where there are greater environmental risks. As the Toxic Cleanup Program, we are well situated to help communities that have higher environmental health risks in order to help alleviate these disparities. Tools like the Washington Tracking Network allow us to look at how our affordable housing cleanup funds can work as an equity mechanism to balance other environmental risks within a community. Ooh. Sorry about that. The environmental risk health disparities map shows us a risk measure that incorporates elements like the risk from an environmental exposure, such as air pollution, environmental effects, such as the proximity to hazardous waste storage sites or Superfund sites, socioeconomic factors like education levels or population below poverty levels, and the presence of sensitive population using indicators like death from cardiovascular disease or the prevalence of low birth weight. Finally, the Affordable Housing Cleanup Program has the greatest opportunity to help communities where housing is least affordable. We can look at the individual components of the environmental health disparity, such as the unaffordable housing metric. In this map, we can see the unaffordable housing risk for the same census tract that the Mount Baker Maddox project is rated 6 out of 10. Using these publicly available resources, we can evaluate not only the affordable housing needs of a community, but also capture a snapshot of the population and the potential environmental justice issues that the community is facing. These issues of environmental justice, gentrification, equity, and displacement, among others, are factors that have driven the need for this grant program. Let's dig into the program itself. I'll briefly summarize how we got started and then describe where we're heading. In about 2015, developers in the Northwest region approached Ecology with some project ideas. Additionally, about the same time, we had a project in Olympia that we were cleaning up using our federal Brownfields grant dollars from EPA. That project resulted in the construction of affordable housing through a partnership between the City of Olympia and the Low Income Housing Institute. It's important to us that we approach our work at Ecology with an open mind. So we listen to the groups that we serve and work with them to find creative solutions to meet the needs of Washington residents. In 2017, the Governor's Environmental Lead and Affordable Housing Lead noticed a synergy between cleaning up contaminated sites and providing affordable housing. So during the summer of 2017, they directed the Toxic Cleanup Program to explore policy options to incentivize collaborations between environmental cleanups and affordable housing developments. In 2018, the Washington State Legislature formally supported linking cleanups with affordable housing. As a result, the Department of Ecology, in consultation with the Department of Commerce, held a solicitation to fund affordable housing projects at contaminated sites. The 2018 efforts led to a pilot program that has operated since about 2019 to the present. The success of these ongoing early projects have resulted in our current development of a new competitive grant program. The Affordable Housing Cleanup Grant Program provides funding to offset cleanup costs and reduce risk for developers who build affordable housing. The program supports communities by cleaning up environmental contamination for residential use, providing meaningful community engagement that informs and shapes decisions throughout the cleanup process, and integrating longer-term goals of shared economic and community asset building across a diverse population. To be a little more specific about what we do, Ecology's Affordable Housing Cleanup Grant Program provides grants for the cleanup of contaminated sites intended for affordable housing development. Through our pilot program and many decades of experience with the developers, we understand how difficult it is to pull a project together and the significant risk that is undertaken. We are designing these grants to help alleviate these risks and address the barriers to constructing affordable housing. Our goal is to develop a competitive grant program for affordable housing for implementation during the 2023-25 biennium. The program will consist of two types of grants, cleanup grants and planning grants. Planning grants will assist a prospective purchaser or current property owner in determining if a property suspected of contamination is indeed contaminated, and if it is, what the nature and extent of contamination looks like. Planning grants provide seed money to developers to help answer early questions about the potential contamination risk of a site. Funded activities might include initial environmental assessments, such as a phase 1 or phase 2. It can also fund outreach to the community. After we have a known contaminated site, cleanup grants provide funding for remediation activities after the property is under a purchase and sale agreement or has been purchased. We'll be looking for proposals for cleanup projects in February of 2022. This solicitation will provide the basis for a project list that will include in our 23-25 budget request to the legislatures. That budget request will also include a request for a pot of money for the planning grants. And then we'll seek proposals for the planning grants at the start of the 23-25 biennium. We're in a transition phase from our pilot program to a more mature program. So currently we're operating under general MACA grant rules. We are currently developing grant guidance specific to the program. And then to complete the transition in the future, we anticipate establishing program specific rules. So who can get the grants? Any private government or nonprofit entity is eligible for these grants. For the cleanup grants in particular, let's talk through the eligibility criteria that we are proposing. The first criteria is critical as it needs to be part of a multifamily affordable housing development. We look at eligibility through the full spectrum of affordable housing up to 80% of AMI. Of the housing units, the project must propose a minimum of 20% affordable units from a total housing space that comprises 50% of the square footage of the building footprint. That's a lot of percentages in one eligibility criteria. So if your head's spinning like mine, I want to illustrate that first criteria with this simple diagram that represents a building. This building meets the minimum of 50% of permanent residential space. And of the 20 housing units shown here, 4 are affordable. So this would meet the requirement of 20% for an affordable housing cleanup grant. To continue through the eligibility criteria, the applicant must agree to property restrictions for a 30-year period. and will rely on the project involving a housing authority as a funding partner or providing an established mechanism that will verify that restrictions are met. The proposed project contains or is within a contaminated site, and the applicant plans up to clean the entire site. That's so that we can avoid creating orphan sites. The applicant needs to be the property owner or prospective purchaser with legal access. We're going to work with them through a formal legal process for cleanup, known as an agreed order or consent decree. And the project is located within an incorporated city, town, or urban growth area. Requiring a match is an evolution from the pilot program, and it's also an area where we've made some adjustment in recent weeks. So you may have come across an earlier proposal with a little different numbers, and this is also an area that we may refine further as we implement the program and find the best way to incentivize as much affordable housing as possible. But the information I'm going to share with you today reflects our current thinking on match requirements for the 2023-25 biennium. First of all, planning grants are eligible to receive up to 100% of eligible costs. That's something that we're not planning on changing. However, for the cleanup grants, match requirements come in tiers. So a project that has 20 to 50% affordable units will be eligible to receive 50% of the eligible cleanup costs. One that's at 50 to 80% of affordable units can get up to 90%. And a project that's got 80 to 100% affordable units would be eligible to receive 100% of the eligible cleanup costs. I wanted to show you our expected timeline again for the grant program. We'll be looking for proposals for cleanup projects in February of 2022. And then the proposals for planning projects we'll be looking for in summer or fall of 2023. That comes a little closer to when we'll have funding. We know that stage, those projects often kind of come together quickly. So that's why we've tried to limit the space between when we'll have the funding and when we ask for proposals. If everything's funded by the legislature, we'd have the funding available for both grant types starting in the summer of 2023. So I want to share with you a few of our early accomplishments. Some of these occurred as part of our pilot effort, and others occurred under our well-established integrated planning grants. Our stakeholders have agreed that planning grants are critical for the success of affordable housing projects because they can help answer early questions about the feasibility and risks of redeveloping a property for affordable housing. IPGs are planning grants for local governments. The planning grants under the Affordable Housing Cleanup Grant will be modeled after our IPGs with adaptations as appropriate. However, one change we are making is that they will be available to any entity, including nonprofit and for-profit affordable housing developers. So let's take a closer look at an example in the city of Wenatchee, which is a city of less than 40,000 in north central Washington. Because the applicant was a local government, Ecology used an integrated planning grant as a mechanism to provide an early version of an affordable housing planning grant. We awarded $200,000 to the city of Wenatchee to evaluate housing as a potential reuse of approximately 10 acres of former orchard land on the western portion of Washington State University's Tree Fruit and Extension Center property. The city of Wenatchee has a housing challenge in which the supply of available housing, both for sale and rental, has decreased while housing prices have increased. That's probably a scenario familiar to many. It has made it difficult to find affordable housing in Wenatchee. Particularly, the education, science, and healthcare sectors face unique challenges of providing short-term housing, especially folks who have limited income from research fellowships or in entry-level career positions. Much of the available land in the Wenatchee area that has not yet been developed is former orchard land. This land is frequently impacted by the historical application of lead arsenate and other pesticides and agricultural chemicals. This is an issue that developers and municipalities have not yet incorporated into their processes. The proponents of these projects need education and technical support to be successful. This funding not only provided support and guidance for development of this historical orchard land, but it has provided education to municipal staff who will be walking other developers through similar projects. To demonstrate the other type of grant available, I want to tell you a little bit more about two projects, the Mount Baker Maddox and Grand Street Commons. Mount Baker Maddox is the first cleanup project that Ecology funded, and it forms the foundation for the current program that we have today. We found seed money to help get it off the ground, and it is the first project that the state legislators gave us money to support. Ecology developed a partnership with the Mount Baker Housing Authority starting in 2015. This partnership was designed and built with the recognition that establishing a lasting grant program depended upon the success of our early projects, including this one. The framework for the partnership was established within a prospective purchaser consent decree. Cleanup construction started in July of 2020, and construction of a mixed-use residential commercial redevelopment is currently underway. This project is projected to add approximately 203 affordable housing units in the 60% AMI range. The site is located in the Mount Baker neighborhood, southeast of downtown Seattle. The site has many of the amenities that make this location ideal for affordable housing. It's 2 blocks from the Mount Baker Light Rail Station, 1 block from Franklin High School, and close to a grocery store. The project consists of 5 separate parcels with 5 different owners who all had different levels of understanding of the environmental concerns. Therefore, a lot of work and multiple property transactions needed to occur to pull this project together. The site had soil and groundwater contamination. The sources included a chlorinated solvent release at a dry cleaners that commingled with a petroleum release at a former service station. The chlorinated solvent plume was found to be migrating toward a residential area. Ecology takes human health seriously and committed in the prospective purchaser consent decree to provide funding for the project if the solvent plume was considered to be a human health risk. We invested considerable ecology funds in the cleanup of this site. The Grand Street Commons is a mixed-use redevelopment on approximately 3.2 acres. It's located south of I-90 and southeast of downtown Seattle. It's 2 blocks from the future Judkins Park Link rail stop, providing easy access to an extensive public transit network. This project consists of a partnership between Lake Union Partners, Mount Baker Housing Authority, and Howe Real Estate. A notable aspect of this project that we have incorporated into the program more generally is that Ecology is building partnerships with both public and private entities to transform underutilized neighborhoods into neighborhoods that people want to live in. Like Mount Baker Maddox, multiple releases occurred from numerous historic businesses on multiple properties, adding to the complexity of the project. Former businesses on the parcels include a dry cleaners, baking machine manufacturing, welding, foundry, aluminum casting, painting, and auto repair. There have been 7 chemicals detected at concentrations greater than the corresponding MACA screening levels, including petroleum contaminants and dry cleaning solvents. The investigation work to date has included assessment of soil, groundwater, and soil gas to determine if vapor intrusion is a risk to future occupants. The consultant performed a vapor intrusion assessment model using the most stringent model-specific and site-specific values. The results of the modeling indicated no risk of potential vapor intrusion in the future at-grade buildings on the east, west, and south blocks. The number of affordable housing units is somewhat fluid because these projects can be fragile. Affordable housing units relative to market rate units are determined in part by the types and amounts of funding received. Grant funds, such as ours, cover project costs that allow the partners to provide units at affordable rates. So the current approximate numbers or projected numbers for this project is 314 affordable units and 420 market rate units. Overall, we want to make sure that the projects, like the ones we just mentioned, provide a benefit to the community that they are serving. So what makes a good fit for the grant program? Some of the aspects that we evaluate include the project's readiness to proceed with minimal regulatory, financial, and logistical barriers to a successful execution, the project's long-term vision for the community and how well it provides beneficial value to create a more livable place, the project's proximity to basic amenities such as transportation, medical resources, recreation, food, educational resources, among others. And the project's alignment with the housing needs of the community and whether it receives community support. We strongly encourage prospective applicants to talk to us early so that we can help assess the project's fit for the program. It's important to communicate with the regions early and to get them on board. There are a couple of reasons for this. First of all, a project needs to have the resources to support the work, including staff capacity to manage the project within the region. We also have other resources available that may provide support in addition or in lieu of this program. Our affordable housing grant program is part of a larger Brownfields program with additional resources for affordable housing. We have a state Brownfields team that helps identify resources from the multitude of sources shown here. If your project isn't a great fit for our new grant program or needs funding for an earlier phase, such as visioning, our state Brownfields team can help point you in the right direction. In addition to the grant program we currently have in development, our state Brownfields team can connect you with existing Brownfield resources. You remember the federally funded project in the city of Olympia that I mentioned earlier. That's an example. Additionally, the assistance we provide is not always money. We provide regulatory oversight for several projects through prospective purchaser consent decrees or agreed orders, even though they have not requested funding. Housing is a statewide need, and we have funded projects across the state. We hope to continue to serve Washington's communities and invest in the type of housing their communities need. And I want to give Bob a chance to introduce himself. If any of you out there are in King County, the Seattle area, or any of the counties between there and the Canadian border, he's the manager of the Northwest Regional Office and would be somebody that you would interface with if you were interested in our grant funds.
Good morning, everyone. First, Richelle, thank you for sharing this information about this new program. It's exciting, and we're just really happy to see it getting off the ground and moving. Again, I'm Bob Warren with Ecology. I manage the cleanup programs Northwest Regional Office. Although I can't really see who's attending this event today, I know I've worked with many of you over the past 30 plus years. We have enjoyed working on many projects across the Northwest Regional Office, and I look forward to working with you on many more. Thank you for attending today's presentation. I'm excited about this new affordable housing program. I know our Northwest team has worked hard since 2015 to get this program successfully off the ground. Richelle, Tamara Cadrona, Kim Smith, and others in Ecology and the Attorney General's office has worked hard with some of you to help form this program. And so thank you. Thank you for helping us move this forward. And thank you for attending again today. I look forward to hearing some of your questions today. Hopefully some input as we continue to form this program. I look forward to seeing some of you take advantage of Ecology's new affordable housing program and help us get sites cleaned up and help us meet the community's needs for affordable housing. So thank you. Back to you, Richelle.
And I'll actually turn things over to Michael to get for questions.
Well, excellent job. And we are seeing a few questions in the chat. Ronald asks, are the grants only for King County or do they extend to Eastern Washington, Spokane County? If so, how do we access the funding?
Yeah, so it's a statewide program. Many of the examples came out of Northwest Region in the beginning, but affordable housing is a need across the state. So go back to the map here. This shows kind of some of the projects that we currently are funding or have funded across the state. So we want to reach across the state. We'll be formally looking for proposals for projects for the cleanup grants. It'll be in February of 2022. For the planning grants, it'll be in the summer of 2023. However, if you've got something now, we do have a small amount of remaining funds from our 1921 budget, and it's always possible for funding to become available during the biennium. And as I said before, we can connect you with resources through our Brownfields, our state Brownfields team. So I encourage you to contact us. We'll take you through what is known as an inquiry process, where we'll get some details about your project and figure out what sort of resources are the best match for you. Michael, I think you might still be on mute.
All right, just missed that. So Paula had a question. She's at a behavioral health agency in Southwest Washington. We are trying to develop affordable, supervised, and supported transitional housing for population that are some of the hardest to place. People with behavioral health conditions that resulted in incarceration. There is a derelict motel in downtown Aberdeen that is run down and likely contaminated with meth. Would this be eligible for an affordable housing cleanup grant?
It's entirely possible. That sounds like it could be. The affordable housing piece, anything in that full spectrum that's, anywhere from the lowest levels of AMI, the housing focused on those up to 80% of AMI is eligible from that perspective. Like I said, I encourage you to contact us. We'll take a look at the information, look and see if we've already got that particular site listed in our database as a contaminated site. That's not necessarily a requirement. That's where the planning grants help us take a look if there's a suspicion of contamination or a lot of the early, we'll take a look at if there's a good possibility that it could be a contaminated site, and can help kind of help you through that process of deciding if you would be eligible or not for our grants.
So on that same vein, how would somebody find that site on your website, the contamination sites or places that have been? Yeah,
we have a web interface that uses a map known as What's in My Neighborhood. And I think one of the easiest ways to get to it is just to Google What's in My Neighborhood for Washington. And it's a pretty easy database to search. Then in that interface, you can just put in an address or kind of drill down to an area and see what sites are there. Although that's not the end of everything. We kind of find sites and list them as they come to us. So it's not entirely comprehensive. There's a lot of sites out there that we haven't encountered yet, so they're not on the list. So just because something isn't listed, we still want you to talk to us and let us know what you're thinking of your project, and we'll help you figure out if you're eligible or not.
Great. Well, Robin has a question. Would you be able to comment on DOE's project-specific NFA and site NFA? Given the extent of this wonderful resource you described, what kind of NFA results?
Bob, you want to take that question?
Well, I'm not sure I understand the question entirely. I think our goal, of course, is to help people clean up contaminated sites across Washington State and foster efforts towards building affordable housing, helping community needs, and we're really looking for places, where communities have been highly impacted and really working towards environmental justice and those issues. The cleanup process is pretty standard in the Model Toxic Control Act. We'll characterize the site through a remedial investigation, put together a feasibility study, determine which alternatives would be best to use to clean up a site. We'll implement that through a cleanup action plan. and typically this work will be done in an agreed order or a consent decree, such as a prospective purchaser consent decree. There'll be a scope of work in those. Work plans will be drafted and implemented. And at the end, when we all have, in a partnership, cleaned up these sites, made them usable for future use, we'll issue a letter that will say you've met the requirements of the agreed order or the consent decree, and the sites addressed the cleanup need. So in the voluntary cleanup program, we have what we call a no further action letter, or NFA letter. Under the formal process, we have a letter that's called a sufficiency letter. They both give the same idea. The site's been addressed properly and it's ready for future use.
Right. And so Robin had sort of a clarification about the no further action letter. So a site no further action letter is hard to get if contaminants begin off-site and migrate to yours. So, yeah.
Yeah, I think there's always complications when a site up gradient of your property has migrated onto your property, whether it's through groundwater and your groundwater has been impacted, or there's been some, above ground, surface runoff that's caused some soil contamination on your property, and how to get that cleaned up so you can build on it again. And so I think, as Richelle said, bring those projects to us. We'll work through those with you. We'll try to find a path forward that will be able to address that contamination and put that property back into future use. But each project is so different, and so we're willing just to sit down with you and work through it. Many times, you can bring that to the regional offices. There's someone like me in all 4 regional offices, and they'd be glad to sit down with you also and just talk about cleanup and how to accomplish those goals.
Somewhat looks like there's a lot of questions related to meth. So Colin asks, would the cleanup grant cover tenant relocation costs during, say, a meth remediation?
Well, Richelle, if I'll take a first stab at that, and you can carry it further if you want. And typically, a meth lab contaminates a structure and inside of a building, and that's a different cleanup, perhaps, than what the toxic cleanup program would be typically dealing with. We would be dealing with if those releases also left the building and had contaminated soil and groundwater, soil vapor, and other things. That would be the typical work we would do to help clean up a site to put it back into future use. That's our typical focus. Some of those other efforts, I think, bring those to Richelle and her team, and we'll certainly work through those with you to see what is eligible cost.
Well, we've seen at the commission, people have told us about situations that's in certain places. There tend to be more certain communities that are having more of a meth problem at a particular time. And the standard is very, very sensitive in the state, probably more sensitive than any other state. So they're running into that quite a bit. But I had a question. Are there still very many, say, gas station? That was years ago, that was a big emphasis of toxics, was to clean up where the gas pumps and the tanks were leaking into the soil. Has most of that been cleaned up, and are there any of those sites still pending?
Yeah, I'll take that one. We have come a long way. We've cleaned up somewhere around 7,000 contaminated sites in Washington state. That being said, we've got a lot of work left to do. I think it's somewhere around another 6,000 that we have left to go. And the largest kind of category of those sites are leaking underground storage tanks, gas stations, and that sort of site.
So many of those gas stations, I gather, may not may decide not to be there again. They may disappear. But what we found is a number of affordable housing sites have been built on those sites. So, and those are generally pretty good locations because they were a good location for pumping gas, but could also be a good site for affordable housing and may be something that people should be looking at to consider, because they're always looking for land. So just a thought. Let's see. Colin had a question. Let's see. Oh, we did Colin's question. Jeff, where can we find program requirements on your website? For example, grant amounts, application info, notice of funding dates, income restrictions on affordable units, etc.
Yeah, we are still finalizing our guidance, so we don't have much more than the presentation we put together. We do have a webpage on our affordable housing cleanup grant program, and another good place to find more information would be just to sign up for our Brownfields listserv. That's a place where we make sure and push out information when we've got opportunities for funding. So that's another good way to stay in touch with us as well. And my contact information is here as well. So if you're having trouble finding anything on the web, feel free to contact me. That's probably the easiest, and I'll connect you, make sure that you are in the loop and what we're coming. But this is an evolving program yet still. So the detail I shared with you today, we don't have on our webpage yet.
And this is Bob Warren again. I also want you to know that we know that these are complicated projects, and it takes a while for you as a developer, affordable housing developer, to really get things off the ground and get it to a point where you're really ready to do some work on the property. We understand that takes time. My suggestion is to contact Department of Ecology early on and get us involved in what you're doing and your thinking, your planning, your vision, and let us work with you as you're moving your vision forward. I think that's probably the best way to make sure that you're doing the things that you need to do on the timeline that you need to do them, to make sure we can support you in these projects.
We've had a lot, in our own internal discussions as we're designing this program. We really don't want anybody to sort of self-select themselves out of this process, because this is new for us. Affordable housing is an area we've only been working in for a few years. So we might need to make some adjustments, into the next biennium as this program evolves. So even if you're feeling like it's not quite right, come to us and tell us about your project, and we'll see if there are other existing resources that are a fit. If not, and we're hearing about a lot of projects that aren't meeting within our requirements, we're going to take that feedback and evolve our program so that we can really meet the need that this community needs, so that the projects move forward.
Robin has another question, or Robin has a question. Does Ecology charge for staff time as we engage early with you? Just wondering when the department begins to bill their time to a project working with you.
Well, I'll take that one. Since most of the work will begin in the regional offices, we typically don't start charging for our time until we've made a decision to pick the site up and start talking about an agreed order or consent decree. That's the time when we would start charging our time for the project. Early on, working with Richelle and her team and working in the regional offices to work through your vision and your thoughts on how to move your project forward. That's just a good public service, and we're we want to help you with that. So don't hesitate to contact us.
Great. And Anne says this is a really wonderful opportunity for our affordable housing providers. It expands the available properties in extremely expensive areas and in areas with limited properties available. And do not assume that you or your project doesn't fit the program requirements. So a wonderful comment. Well, we might have time for if there's anybody else has a question, please type it quickly. But just looking at your presentation, I'm impressed with the thoughtfulness of it. And I think really researching what the affordable housing industry needs. And so I'm very impressed. And I'm hoping that people will find this because, again, land for things is very difficult to come by and somewhat expensive. So looks like smiles all around. Just another thing. So are there any other communities, just so people know that you've done a lot of work in, maybe some of the smaller places?
Yeah, I'll go back to the map again. So here in Wenatchee, that's the Tree Fruit Research Center that I mentioned and talked about during the presentation. We've got a project right now in Spokane known as Daybreak Youth Services. We've also worked on a project with the city of Kennewick. And then up north in Bellingham, there's another project. And then this kind of focus in on the Seattle area. We've got several projects there as well. And we've heard interest from across the state. We know that affordable housing is a need everywhere and it's unique to each community. So this just reflects current projects. We've heard and have a lot of other projects throughout the state that are in earlier stages and haven't gotten to funding yet.
And I've personally been to a project, the Jefferson Apartments, that was put together by now called Community Roots, used to be Capitol Housing, Capitol Hill Housing, and just a beautiful apartment and thoroughly modern, just a beautiful thing and in a great place and is really needed.
Yeah, and there's many other projects we're working on that they're not asking for our funding, but they are asking for our assistance in cleaning up sites, offering prospective purchaser consent decrees and other regulatory tools that make it possible for them to be successful. They're not on this list, but they're still taking a lot of effort. Our team's helping many of those sites move forward also. So they're scattered across the state, and we're just really excited about seeing this statewide program take off. So thank you for attending today and for your interest.
Great, let's see. Oh, somebody, Jocelyn asked, what is happening with the Daybreak Site in Spokane? Anybody familiar with that?
I'm not familiar with much with the details in particular. I think we may have given them a planning grant to do some environmental investigation work at the site. If I'm recalling correctly, they had done a little bit of work already, and our funding kind of helps fill in some additional information to get a better picture of what the contamination looks like at that site.
Great. Well, yeah, there's just so much going on, and we really appreciate it and all the work that you're helping house people that really, really do need the help.
Right. And if somebody is interested in a particular project like that one, feel free to send me an email. I can connect you with the folks that are specifically managing that project that have all the details.
Right, and your email is listed in with the description for this particular thing. Remember, you will be able to view the recording of this later. And thank you. I guess we're Don't see anything else in the chat, just good vibes all around. And we appreciate that and hope to see some good things soon.
Yes, thank you. We will have more information coming as we move between now and February, when we'll have our first kind of call for proposals.
And I will put that in the AMC e-news, which goes out to thousands of subscribers. So that should help.
Great, thank you.
So I
Thank
guess
you all for a great presentation.
we'll close it out. Thank you.
Thank you.